guys, welcome back to Home Built, and in this episode on the Rockstar we are going to continue with where we were last week with the oil filter adapter plate, and we may even fit an oil cooler. Alright guys, welcome back, and those of you watching last week will have seen that I fitted myself an oil accumulator to the Rockstar last week, and there seems to have been a bit of confusion about what was going on, how it works and what it actually does. So I thought I would go through that in a bit more detail. If you missed last week's episode, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up, and think about subscribing if you haven't. Click the bell and all that sort of stuff. It does help us out. Alright, so yeah, there was a bit of confusion about the oil accumulator and how it works. As I did mention last week, it is not finished. I still need to fit a one-way valve. So essentially the way it works is when the car gets up to oil pressure, it pushes a whole bunch of oil that's stored in the cylinder at the same pressure that the car is at. So as the pressure goes up and down, there might be a bit more or a bit less oil in that cylinder, but not a lot basically around that the running oil pressure. It's only when it goes dry that it actually goes, oh, there's no oil pressure, and it will then push the oil back into the system, and it needs to be in the pressure part of the oil system. So because it is completely fed by the pressure of the oil system, that's how it runs. And with the one-way valve, when there is no oil pressure, it won't let the oil go back into the sump. It will push it into the engine, into the back where it normally goes in the engine, through all the oil galleries, and it will lubricate the bearings and the cams and everything. So that's how it works. Another very common question, which was asked quite a bit, is why didn't I get myself a different oil filter? That way I wouldn't have had to go around and stuff around and make an adapter. I could have got an oil filter that fitted the existing fittings. That wasn't going to help. It would not help me in any way, because basically if I got an oil filter that would fit this adapter, how do I get that end onto the car? It doesn't compute. I still need to make a fitting to join to the car, so that's why I had to make a new fitting to work. You know, just getting an oil filter that fits one end is fine, but then it's still stuck on the other end. So the other end is the issue, and yeah, you may as well stick to the same size oil filter if you're going to go to the effort of making a new fitting anyway. So moving on to what we're going to tackle this week. So looking at this this fitting, when I had a bit of a further look at it, I wasn't very happy with the fittings that they're running in this. This is just a generic thing. This is not one of the Raceworks ones that I use generally. The issue is even though they are dash 10 fittings on the outside, the back actually steps down quite a bit, and it's quite a restriction. It's quite a small opening on these, which I was not happy with. It's going to restrict the flow of the oil far too much. The rest of the opening is actually, you know, reasonably large. If you compare it to the pressure side, all the oil goes into these small holes around the outside. Yeah, I'm quite happy with the opening size on this. It's just this opening here. I thought about trying to drill it out and tap it was going to be way too hard. The much simpler and more straightforward method is to just drill it out and then weld on a aluminium Raceworks AN-10 fitting, and then hopefully I will not have any restrictions in oil flow. Okay, so I've got my fittings welded on now. It's not the prettiest, but I should do the job. I think there must have been some contamination in the base aluminium for some reason. Like, I just kept getting bubbles coming up through it, so I'm not sure what the aluminium was that the fitting is made out of, but it didn't like it very much. I think I've managed to go around and hopefully we should be hole free. So that while that is cooling down, it's still very, very hot. I might get over and start having a look at how I'm going to fit this oil cooler into the engine bay. So this is the oil cooler I'm going to fit. It's a Dash 10 oil cooler I got off of eBay a long time ago. I actually bought it for the Ferrari, but I needed a Dash 12 oil cooler for that. And this is Dash 10, which is what I am using. So this is perfect. And I've been looking around to try and see where I can actually fit it in the car. And as it's going to be very difficult to run oil lines up to the front of the car, I'm not really seeing that as a great option. And underneath, I was sort of searching around and then realised that over on this side, we have the air filter. That air filter up there is getting fed by the external side vent of the Boxster. And over on this side, there's an electric fan that's not connected anymore. I'm not sure exactly what it cooled originally, but it's not being used. So I'm going to take this shroud out, and this is going to go up in here and be fed by this external vent right there. So it's a perfect spot for the oil cooler and keeps the oil run nice and short all down near the oil filter. Is going to be a perfect spot. So let's start disassembling what we can while it's in this tight little spot in here. All right, so you can see now with the fan out of the way, there is a bunch of room up here to fit my oil cooler, which it should be quite easy to make some mounts up and get it fed directly from that vent without any real dramas. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so it's not the easiest place to actually film, but you can see that my oil cooler is all mounted up. I've got bolt holes on the bottom here, and there's also a bolt on the bottom on the other side. But on the top corner, I've actually put a plate, a 90-degree plate, so it just sort of wedges in at the top, just so that it's not just bolted at the bottom and it can flop around. That's all wedged in now, nice and solid. There's a nice solid oil cooler that now I need to plumb in. All right, so the oil cooler is mounted in. It's beautifully aimed, so it'll be fed by the side vent into the engine bay. Nice and firmly mounted. I'm quite happy with that. I am just waiting on a couple of fittings and stuff to come from Raceworks to finish that up. But it's not worth bolting it all together right now because I have to do something about the overheating problem that we had last week. And I've just gone and ordered myself a new water pump and thermostat because I don't think the thermostat is actually opening. You could see the temperature rose. It went up over 100 degrees and it was actually bubbling out of the overflow in the expansion tank. So the system is still holding fluid and it hasn't, the expansion tank level hasn't lowered. I believe it's reasonably well bled. I think the main issue is that, the thermostat is just not opening because the radiator pipes to the front were not hot at all. There was definitely no coolant flowing through them, so there's nothing getting to the radiators. So I have ordered myself a new water pump and thermostat. But of course, on this engine, it's not that easy, is it? Because it's actually behind the timing belt. So you have to take the timing belt off. And I think it's actually driven by the timing belt. I thought it was originally one of the pulleys coming off of the serpentine belt, but it's not. It's actually deeper in, and it's actually driven off the timing belt. So that means I could possibly do it in the car, but I think it looks like it's a more complicated job. It's going to be much easier with the engine out. So we're pulling the engine out again. So let's get into it. All right, that was, it's getting slightly less painful to remove this engine, but my issue is that the power steering is, there's no easy way to disconnect it, so you basically have to drain the power steering to drop the engine, which is a bit of a pain, but that's the way it goes on these engine swaps. But it's down far enough now that I think I should be able to get in and start changing or taking off all these covers, take off the timing belt covers, and start having a look at what we need to do to change that water pump and thermostat. So you can see I've got the big pulley off now, and you can see here the hydraulic tensioner, and then there's the pre-tensioner here. I've marked the belt. Now, this is not the way to do it properly. The way to do it properly is you get the factory bar in across, because you should actually decouple this gear from the cam itself. So the cam itself is locked to this bar, but this gear can spin completely around, but it's locked in at the moment, and I'm not changing the belt, so I don't need to bother with changing that. It all works and runs as it is. I've marked the crank pulley, and as I said, I've marked the cam pulleys. So now it's time to disconnect this and then start pulling off water pump, and the thermostat is in right under there. All right, the belt's off. I've got my pulleys cable tied so that they don't just spin around. They stay roughly where they need to be. I've got the cover here. I just unbolted off, and this is where the thermostat is, so in behind this this cover. So you can see that there. I'm not sure how old it is, but we'll see if we can get the thermostat out and then swap it over. Boiled these up, and you can see that this one here, this is the one that I just pulled out. I like it much more than this other one. It opened earlier. This one here opened earlier and more to let more flow through than the other one. So maybe I had a different issue that wasn't the thermostat, because that thermostat looks like it's going to flow quite nicely, whereas this other one, this new one, this is the new one, it's not really opening much. I'm not as big a fan. Okay, so after checking my thermostat just then and seeing that my old one looks like it's all functioning the way it's supposed to, and everything looks new and neat and tidy in there, the tensioner, belt tensioner looks good, the belt looks good, the water pump looks relatively new, everything looks good in there, got me going back to why I was still getting overheating problems, and was it actually the thermostat? My automatic assumption is, okay, thermostat's not opening, so it's just overheating because the radiator pipes were not warm. But I think it's more my stuff up than the rest of it. So basically, this is the fitting here. The thermostat sits in the engine block here, and all the water circulates in the engine until the thermostat opens, and then it lets the hot coolant out, goes down, and gets pumped into the radiator. Now, can you see a problem here? This is my T-piece that goes off into my expansion tank. So I can see automatically now what's happening is that as soon as the thermostat opened, there would have been some water going to the radiator, but a lot of pressure, and all of the water pump is pushing hot water straight up into the expansion tank, and I believe that's what the issue is. Particularly, we've got this taper here, so the water is really wanting to go in there. I had a look back at how it was all set up on the Boxster originally, and originally this expansion tank is actually connected to the cold side of the heater core. So the heater doesn't need to be open for it to fill the whole system, but basically the coolant is just sort of filled by that part of the system, so it's not actually pressured, and the water pump can go straight to the radiator and back and not be interfered with by this system. So I think that was the problem. So I pulled the engine out for no reason. Yay! So now I'm thinking I might actually replicate the way that they connected it together. And I'm going to make this a solid tube. I'm going to make a new T-piece to connect up the expansion tank to the current radiator hoses and avoid any of this headache altogether. What a pain. But that means I'm going to put it all back together. I actually like the current thermostat more than the new one that I bought. So some of you might not like that, but I think I'm going to keep using the other one. As I said, it looks new. They both look brand new, and it's functioning properly. So I'm happy putting it back in again. I think I'm probably going to even leave the water pump in there because there's no leaks. This seems to be working fine. So I don't think it's the water pump either. I think it is just my stupidity that's created this whole problem, and I've given myself a whole bunch of work. All right, well, we've put it all back together now, and there have been a couple of things. So, first of all, I found out why the belt was slipping. It's because this belt tensioner is actually come back and it's always all the way on its stop. Like, there is a bit of tension in the belt, but really the belt needs to be a little bit smaller. It's a little bit too loose, and the tensioner is not actually under proper tension. So, yeah, so I just need to order a shorter belt. So that's an easy fix. All right, so you can see now I've got my sandwich plate all set up, and basically the oil comes out of this side here. It goes up to my Raceworks one-way valve. Now this is a -12. I stepped it up because I just wanted to make sure there was plenty of flow. So it's -10 hose, but it steps up to -12 one-way valve, making sure that the oil flow direction is correct, because obviously if that's not, then there's not going to be any oil pressure. That goes directly up into the oil cooler. It's a bit hard to see up in here, but basically the other side comes out of the oil cooler along to this Y piece here, and one branch that goes back, and that is actually to the oil accumulator. The other branch of the Y piece comes straight down and back along and back into the oil filter, then into the filter, back into the engine, and continues on its flow. So that was a whole heap of work, and a lot of it I didn't need to do. Dropping the engine took me it took me a couple of days to drop the engine, but all up, this is about almost 4 days of work, this episode. But I do have an oil cooler installed, which I think is a big step. I now have better flow through that sandwich plate. I'm much happier with the flow through that. The whole volume of the pipes now is much better. It's a -10 all the way through to the oil accumulator. We've got a one-way valve in there now. So basically the reason for the one-way valve is that when the oil pressure drops, the oil accumulator pumps the oil back. It's not going to go back into the sump. It will actually go back into the engine, so directly into where it would normally be pumping into the engine anyway, and going through all of the bearings, etc. So that's where you want it. So we actually have things sorted now. Also, I've finally realised why my overheating was happening, and even though it was a bit of a pain pulling the engine out, it made me see better in my mind, exactly know where the thermostat was and where the water pump was. I didn't know where that was before. So knowing how the direction of flow goes, I realised now, as soon as the thermostat opened, because as soon as it got up to temperature, it just suddenly looked like it was overheating, because hot water is being forced straight back into that overflow, and the overflow is just going too much pressure and letting it go, rather than going into, as the box originally had it, into the cold side of the heater. It'll still fill the system. When there's expansion in the system, the water's going to pressure in every direction, so it's going to go up into the overflow and it will still work. So I'm quite happy with plumbing it up that way. I'm just waiting on a few more Raceworks fittings to tee that all in, and then I can put the rest of the radiator pipes up and all the rest of it and put it back together again. And hopefully then it should run without overheating, and yeah, we're close. Oh, and one last point, as I actually did go and get a smaller belt. As I mentioned, I got one size smaller at the local parts shop, and it's too small to fit. So I needed one in between, which I've had to custom order. That will come in a couple of days. So you'll see it next time. Anyway, that's enough blathering. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, like, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. Join us on Patreon to watch the videos a day early, ad-free. And if you need parts for any of your Porsches, even the ugliest Boxster in the world, please go and compare prices at PorschePartsByJeff.com first. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.